Hi everyone. Today I'd like to run through setting up a NGINX reverse proxy. I'm going to be sticking this in front of my Apache web server, and then at a later date also putting my email server behind it as well. So on the screen you can see a quick rundown of how I've got my internal network set up. So on the top right you can see our internet connection coming in through our firewall, OpenSense router, which is combined, and then from there I've got three subnets divided up. My host machines are all on the .10 network behind its own firewall config. The DNS server, among other servers, are behind the .2 firewall and subnet. Then I'm going to have my exposed web services on the .3 network and behind the reverse proxy. So any traffic coming in will be forwarded from my port forwarded from my OpenSense router through to the proxy, and then the proxy will deliver the traffic to the correct web service. Today for this demonstration, this web server will be serving up two web pages, webserver1.com and webserver2.com. So both of these web pages have been configured and are up and live and running in Apache server. So right now the current setup is the host machine will reach out to the DNS server, which will provide the direct IP address of the Apache web server, return that to the host machine, and the host machine will connect directly to the Apache web server. Going forward, I'm also going to be putting in my email server and other web services that I have exposed. So here we can see our DNS configuration as it sits. We have webserver1.com with the associated IP of .30.2 and webserver2.com with the associated IP .30.2. So any traffic or DNS requests that will come to this DNS server, this IP, which is the IP address of the Apache web server, will be dished out, and then a direct connection can be made. On the right here we can see the two configuration files I have for the Apache web server. So the virtual host listening in port 80 for both of them, the document routes which are pointing it to the correct web page, which will contain the .index or the index.html file, the server name, so it'll be looking for that in the header, so it will know which index file or which document route to be serving from, and the error log and custom log. So these are going to be your error and access log. So you can use that for troubleshooting to see if there's problems connecting and who's accessing or how many visitors you have to your access to your web server. Just down below I have a TCP dump running on the interface of the web server, just listening on port 80 for unencrypted traffic, and the TAC-NN flag, which is going to give me the raw IP addresses and port numbers. So if I head over to webserver1 and I refresh this page, we should see traffic coming through, and we have, and we can see that the IP is coming from 172.16.10.100 on an ephemeral port, and going through to 16.30.2 on port 80. Now, taking note of the port number there, 59174, if we do that from webserver 2, refresh the page, we're getting traffic. That's on 59176. So you can see it's actually incrementing the outbound ports and connecting directly to the Apache web server. Alright, so we can leave that there. We'll jump into our NGINX server and do the config from scratch. So we'll go straight in there, and what we can do is check for NGINX. Not found because it's not installed. So first thing we can do is DNF. What I will do is jump into root, DNF update, nothing there, and clear the screen, DNF install NGINX. Now this is the 1.14 stream, so we'll just go ahead and install that. Alright, so if we run our systemctl status, nope, wrong server. So we run system CTL status NGINX. We can see it hasn't been started yet, and so we can start that by doing a systemctl enable now to get it started now, NGINX, and now it's running and it's enabled, so it will start at boot. So if we use the RPM command to query the configuration files and pass the package, we can see the different configuration files available to us. So we'll be initially looking into the nginx.conf, and then we'll be making some custom configuration files to point to our web servers. So if we navigate to SELinux, we can start there. Let's try to put the right command in. Alright, vim nginx, have a look at the conf. So this is just the configuration for just the actual daemon and the process. So this is the raw error log, but if we scroll down, we can see things that are interesting to us will be the loading modular configuration files. So this is where we will put our custom configuration files, so we pass through the web request to the right IP destination and pass the correct headers. So listening on port 80 and also an IPv6. This server name doesn't carry a name right now, but if you were to install SSL certificates in this and had a registered domain, this is something you'd have to update. And you can see the root directory if you were to connect to this web server and it just loaded the default page. That's where the index page will be. Alright, so we can get out of that. We'll change into the confd, and there's nothing in there. So initially what we can do is we can just vim server1.conf, and we're going to make our custom configuration file. So the first line will be server, curly braces, we're going to give it a list port 80, close the line with a semicolon, give it a server name to be looking out for, and we're going to have webserver1.com. We're going to give it a logging path, so access log, and that'll be under var log nginx, and then access.log, and that will, if we need to, show us what connections have been successfully made, and then we'll also pass it for an error log as well in the same directory. Error.log. So we can give it a location for its root, and we're going to give it a proxy pass command, and 172.16.30.2. Now this is the address for our Apache web server, and we want to pass that through on HTTP, which is going to be on port 80, and we're also going to set another flag or another config, and that is proxy set header, and the host is the part of the header that we're going to be passing, and we're going to pass that with the host name, and that is the host name that will be in the HTTP GET request to make sure that it's actually passing webserver1.com or webserver2.com. If you don't put this in, it's just going to be sending everything from whatever's being requested straight to the web server, and the web server is just going to arbitrarily serve whatever config files it finds first, or it may do a round robin depending on the web server and the setup. So we can right quit out of that. That should be all we need, and test the NGINX configuration with NGINX, pass the T flag, and it's given us syntax is okay. So we can do a system ctl restart NGINX. Alright, now we're going to have to look at the firewall, so make sure we have the appropriate ports open. So firewall cmd list all. Okay, so what have we got? Cockpit, DHCP-v6 and SSH. So it's not currently listening, or it's not going to be accepting connections on port 80. And we can have a look and see what's listening. So socket service, L for list, N for numbered, and T for TCP ports. And we can see that this server is listening on port 80 and 22 on both IPv4 and IPv6. However, our firewall isn't going to allow any connections over port 80. So we can amend that with firewall cmd add service HTTP, give it the permanent flag, and that will make sure it is applied on reboot, and then we can reload that to make sure it takes. We'll list all again, and we can see that HTTP has been added, so it will be listening and accepting connections on that port. Now if we go back to our web servers, what I'm going to do is just clear the browsing cache because that's given me problems in the past. We're still listening on the Apache web server, and then we can see what we're going to get. So if we reload this web page, oh, it's still come through, so I need to update my DNS records. So we can trash both of those records. We'll trash web server 1, and then we'll give it webserver1.com, and we're going to pass that the IP address of the proxy server. And we'll go ahead and just point number 2 at it as well. There we go. So both of these should be passing DNS responses to the host, pointing it at the Apache, the NGINX web server or reverse proxy. So if we go through, reload that, I'm going to clear this cache again, and we've got a bad gateway. Now this is due to SELinux actually blocking the access from the HTTP daemon to the external port, or to the web port. So we can confirm this by doing SELinux, set that to 0. If we reload that, okay, so we've got our connection. Now what this has done for us, if we set enforce and then we'll set that back to 1 because we know what we're dealing with, we can have a look at the SELinux log and see what it's actually doing. So if we do a grep avc from var log audit log and have a look at our last lines, we can see we've had an audit message. That was our set enforce. Here we are. So denied for NGINX, destination 80, and so the source context was the HTTP daemon, and its target was the HTTP port. So that's going to be port 80. So the target context and the source context don't line up, and we can remedy this a couple of ways. We can do a custom fcontext configuration, or we can change a boolean for this one. So if we do set se bool, and this is going to be HTTPD because we saw that, can network relay, and then set that to 1, it should remedy our problem. And we'll have a look at the web server as well. So that's fine. And if we have a look at our connections coming in, the IP address is coming from 172.16.30.1 on 54.188, and it's coming through to our Apache web server at .30.280. Now, this is good. We'll check our next one. Oh no, we've got a problem here. So this is getting our default NGINX ARMA Linux, and that's because I haven't done the second configuration file in the web server. So if we list our documents, okay, so copy server1 to server2.conf, we'll edit that, and what we can do is you just change the web server to the host name that it's looking for, and the rest of it can remain the same because we're going to be passing it to the same address, and also we still want to keep the host header, which is this part, being passed through to the Apache web server. So if we right quit out of this and then restart NGINX, and that way it's going to reread its config files, and we should be able to successfully load the web page. Alright, there we go. And looking at that one, it's coming from our reverse proxy at 30.1 on port 51190, and coming to our Apache web server at .30.2 over port 80. So this pretty much finishes the configuration as it's going to be sitting here. The reason I've had to do this was because I've started hosting multiple servers behind the proxy, and I wanted an extra layer of security between anything that was exposed to the web, so I can have multiple firewalls, multiple lockdown configurations, and then have separation via subnets and firewalls internally. So if I have a SQL server or a MariaDB server, that's going to be sitting in a different subnet behind a second set of firewalls, and only the dedicated addresses from either the web servers or from the email server or anything else that I have running will be able to access through the firewall, and the configurations on the servers will be only accepting connections from certain places. So that's going to be more in-depth configuration and stuff I'll go through in the future, but I hope this helps for anyone who's looking to play with NGINX and set up a reverse proxy, or even start using NGINX as a web server as well. I'm going to go through and probably move away from Apache in the future, so look out for that one. If you've got any questions, please leave them in the comments. See you later.